Sarah Martinez had always been the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she learned early that watching and waiting often revealed more than endless chatter ever could. Her father, a veteran of the Gulf War, had taught her that true strength didn't need to announce itself with loud words or boastful claims. The strongest steel, he would tell her while they worked together in his garage, doesn't make the most noise when it bends. This philosophy followed Sarah through high school, where she excelled in academics while her classmates focused on social drama and popularity contests. She preferred the company of books to the chaos of teenage social circles, spending her free time reading about criminal justice and law enforcement procedures. Her teachers noticed her analytical mind and attention to detail, qualities that would serve her well in her chosen career path. When Sarah announced her intention to join the police academy after graduating from college with a degree in criminal justice, her family was supportive but concerned. Her mother worried about the dangers of police work, while her father wondered if his quiet, thoughtful daughter had the aggressive edge that many believed was necessary for law enforcement. Sarah understood their concerns but felt a deep calling to serve her community and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The police academy proved to be Sarah's first real test. From day one, her instructors and fellow cadets questioned whether she had what it took to be an effective officer. During tactical training exercises, while other cadets shouted commands and charged forward with aggressive enthusiasm, Sarah moved deliberately and quietly, observing the situation before acting. Her approach was methodical rather than forceful, analytical rather than instinctive. "Martinez, you need to speak up," Sergeant Williams would bark during training scenarios. "In the field, hesitation can get you or your partner killed. You can't think your way out of every situation." The criticism stung, but Sarah persevered, knowing that her approach, while different, had its own strengths. During written examinations and scenario-based tests, she consistently scored in the top percentile, demonstrating a deep understanding of police procedures, constitutional law, and crisis management. Her physical training was equally challenging, not because she lacked the ability, but because her quiet demeanor was often mistaken for weakness. During defensive tactics classes, instructors would pair her with larger, more aggressive trainees, expecting her to struggle. Instead, Sarah's background in martial arts, which she had pursued quietly throughout college, served her well. She had spent years studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Krav Maga, disciplines that emphasized technique over brute strength, precision over power. The turning point came during a particularly intense training exercise designed to simulate a domestic violence call. While other cadets rushed into the scenario with weapons drawn and voices raised, Sarah approached the situation differently. She listened to the audio cues, noticed the subtle body language of the role-playing actors, and identified details that others missed. When the suspect made an unexpected move, Sarah was ready, using her training to subdue the threat without excessive force while simultaneously protecting the victim. After the exercise, Sergeant Williams pulled her aside. "That was different, Martinez," he said, his tone more thoughtful than critical. "Not what I expected, but effective. You see things others miss." It was the first time an instructor had acknowledged that her quiet approach might actually be an asset rather than a liability. Despite this small victory, Sarah continued to face skepticism from her peers. Many of her fellow cadets came from military backgrounds or had grown up in law enforcement families. They spoke the language of tactical operations and aggressive intervention, viewing policing through the lens of combat and confrontation. Sarah's approach seemed foreign to them, almost passive in comparison to their more direct methods. During group discussions about police tactics and community relations, Sarah often found herself at odds with the prevailing attitudes of her classmates. While they talked about maintaining authority through strength and intimidation, she advocated for de-escalation techniques and community engagement. Her suggestions were often met with eye rolls and dismissive comments about social work versus real police work. The academic portion of the training continued to play to Sarah's strengths. Her instructors were impressed by her understanding of legal procedures, her ability to write detailed and accurate reports, and her knowledge of community policing strategies. She excelled in courses on crisis negotiation, victim advocacy, and criminal investigation techniques. However, the practical applications remained challenging as her quiet nature was consistently viewed as a weakness. One particularly difficult day came during a simulated high-stress scenario involving multiple suspects and potential weapons. Sarah's team was tasked with clearing a building and apprehending dangerous criminals. As they moved through the exercise, Sarah noticed inconsistencies in the setup that suggested the scenario was not what it appeared to be. However, when she tried to communicate her observations to the team leader, he dismissed her concerns and ordered the team to proceed with the original plan. The exercise ended with Sarah's team failing to achieve their objectives, having fallen into a carefully constructed trap that Sarah had identified early in the scenario. During the debrief, when the instructors asked what went wrong, Sarah finally spoke up, explaining her observations and why she had believed the situation required a different approach. The room fell silent as the instructors confirmed that her assessment had been correct and that following her instincts would have led to a successful outcome. This moment marked a subtle shift in how some of her instructors viewed Sarah's capabilities. While many of her peers remained skeptical, a few began to recognize that her quiet observation skills and analytical approach might offer valuable insights that their more traditional methods missed. However, the overall culture of the academy remained focused on aggressive, vocal leadership, leaving Sarah feeling like an outsider in her chosen profession. As graduation approached, Sarah faced a crucial decision about her future in law enforcement. Despite her strong academic performance and growing recognition from some instructors, the constant criticism of her quiet nature had taken its toll. She began to wonder if she was truly suited for police work or if she should consider other career paths that might be more accepting of her natural temperament and approach to problem-solving. The final weeks of the academy brought intensive scenario-based training designed to test everything the cadets had learned. Sarah found herself once again struggling with the expectation that she should be more vocal and aggressive in her approach. During one particularly challenging exercise involving a hostage situation, her careful analysis of the scenario and methodical approach to resolution were overshadowed by criticism that she had taken too long to act and hadn't demonstrated sufficient command presence. The weight of constant criticism began to affect Sarah's confidence in ways she hadn't anticipated. For the first time since beginning her law enforcement journey, she started to question whether the instructors and her peers might be right. Perhaps policing did require a more aggressive personality than she possessed. Maybe her quiet, analytical nature was indeed a liability in situations that demanded quick, decisive action and strong vocal leadership. Her father noticed the change in her demeanor during their weekly phone calls. The enthusiasm and determination that had carried her through college and into the academy seemed to be fading, replaced by self-doubt and uncertainty. When he asked about her experiences, Sarah found herself sharing her struggles for the first time, admitting that she was beginning to wonder if she had chosen the wrong career path. "Remember what I taught you about steel," her father reminded her during one particularly difficult conversation. "The strongest steel doesn't make noise, but it also doesn't break under pressure. Maybe the problem isn't with you, but with how others are measuring strength." His words provided some comfort, but Sarah continued to struggle with the gap between her natural abilities and the expectations of her chosen profession. The academy's emphasis on traditional policing methods left little room for alternative approaches to law enforcement. While Sarah excelled in areas like community relations, crisis negotiation, and detailed investigation work, these skills were often viewed as secondary to the more dramatic aspects of police work like high-speed pursuits, tactical operations, and physical confrontations. Her instructors seemed to believe that without a commanding voice and aggressive presence, she would be ineffective in the field. As Sarah prepared for her final examinations and graduation ceremony, she made a decision that would shape the rest of her career. Rather than allowing the criticism to defeat her or drive her away from law enforcement, she chose to view it as motivation to prove that effective policing could take many forms. She began to see her quiet nature not as a weakness to be overcome, but as a unique strength that could complement the more traditional approaches of her colleagues. This shift in perspective came just in time, as Sarah was about to face challenges that would test not only her training but also her resolve to stay true to her own approach to law enforcement. The academy had prepared her for many scenarios, but real-world policing would prove to be far more complex and nuanced than any training exercise could simulate. Sarah's first assignment took her to the downtown precinct of a mid-sized city, where urban challenges met suburban expectations in a complex web of social and economic tensions. The precinct served a diverse community that included everything from upscale business districts to struggling neighborhoods where poverty and crime intersected in predictable and tragic ways. For a rookie officer, it was both an opportunity to learn and a trial by fire that would test every aspect of her training. Her field training officer, Detective Mike Rodriguez, was a 20-year veteran with a reputation for being tough but fair. When he first met Sarah, his expression was skeptical but not unkind. He had trained dozens of rookies over the years and had developed an ability to quickly assess which ones would thrive in police work and which ones would struggle to adapt to the realities of the job. "So you're the quiet one I've been hearing about," Rodriguez said during their first meeting. "The academy instructors said you think too much and don't talk enough for police work. We'll see about that." His tone was matter-of-fact rather than critical, suggesting that he was willing to form his own opinion rather than relying solely on the academy's assessment. Their first week together was a period of careful observation and gradual learning. Rodriguez showed Sarah the various neighborhoods they would patrol, explaining the unique challenges and dynamics of each area. He pointed out the corners where drug deals typically occurred, the buildings known for domestic violence calls, and the businesses that frequently experienced shoplifting or vandalism. His approach was educational rather than dramatic, focusing on practical knowledge that would help Sarah understand the community she was serving. During their first few calls, Rodriguez noticed something that the academy instructors had missed. While Sarah was indeed quieter than many officers, her silence was not passive or disengaged. She was constantly observing, noting details that others overlooked, and processing information in ways that led to insights that more vocal officers might miss. When they responded to a burglary call, Sarah noticed inconsistencies in the victim's story that suggested insurance fraud rather than a genuine crime. "How did you pick up on that?" Rodriguez asked after they had completed their investigation and confirmed Sarah's suspicions. "The victim seemed credible to me initially." Sarah explained her observations about the selective nature of the items supposedly stolen, the lack of forced entry despite claims of a break-in, and the victim's body language when describing the incident. Rodriguez was impressed by her attention to detail and analytical approach. As the weeks progressed, Sarah began to find her rhythm as a police officer. Her quiet nature, which had been viewed as a liability at the academy, proved to be an asset in many real-world situations. During domestic violence calls, her calm presence and ability to listen without judgment often helped victims feel safe enough to share crucial information. Witnesses who might have been intimidated by more aggressive officers were willing to talk to Sarah, providing details that proved essential for successful investigations. Her first major test came during a complex domestic disturbance call that had escalated beyond the typical arguments and threats. The situation involved multiple family members, allegations of drug use, and concerns about weapons in the home. When Sarah and Rodriguez arrived, they found a chaotic scene with neighbors gathered outside and angry voices coming from within the house. While Rodriguez coordinated with backup officers and secured the perimeter, Sarah was tasked with making contact with the family members inside. Rather than immediately asserting authority through loud commands, she knocked gently on the door and spoke in a calm, measured tone. When a frightened woman answered, Sarah introduced herself quietly and asked if she could help resolve the situation. The woman, Maria Gonzalez, was initially suspicious of police involvement but found herself responding to Sarah's non-threatening approach. As they talked, Sarah learned that the disturbance had started over concerns about Maria's teenage son, who had been staying out late and showing signs of drug use. The situation had escalated when Maria's husband had threatened to call the police, causing the son to barricade himself in his room and threatened to run away. Sarah's approach to resolving the situation was methodical and patient. Rather than demanding immediate compliance or threatening consequences, she worked to understand each family member's perspective and identify underlying issues that had contributed to the crisis. She spent time talking with the son, learning about pressures he was facing at school and in the neighborhood that had led him to experiment with drugs as an escape mechanism. Over the course of 2 hours, Sarah helped facilitate a family discussion that addressed not only the immediate crisis but also the underlying problems that had created the situation. She connected the family with social services resources, provided information about drug counseling programs, and helped them develop a plan for moving forward. By the end of the call, what had begun as a potential arrest situation had been transformed into an intervention that addressed root causes rather than just symptoms. Rodriguez was quietly impressed by Sarah's handling of the situation. In his 20 years of experience, he had rarely seen a rookie officer demonstrate such skill in de-escalation and problem-solving. Most officers would have arrested someone just to clear the call, he told Sarah as they drove away. You actually solved the problem instead of just moving it to someone else's desk. This success was followed by others that began to establish Sarah's reputation within the precinct. Her approach to police work was becoming recognized as effective, even if it was different from traditional methods. She consistently achieved positive outcomes in situations that might have escalated under different handling, and her arrest rates, while lower than some officers, were accompanied by higher prosecution success rates due to her thorough investigation techniques. However, not everyone in the precinct appreciated Sarah's methods. Some veteran officers viewed her approach as too soft or time-consuming, arguing that police work required quick, decisive action rather than extended conversations and social work interventions. During shift meetings, comments were sometimes made about touchy-feely policing that failed to address the reality of criminal behavior and the need for strong law enforcement presence. These criticisms came to a head during a particularly busy weekend when multiple incidents stretched the department's resources thin. Sarah was criticized for spending too much time on a shoplifting call, thoroughly investigating the circumstances and discovering that the suspect was stealing food for her children because she had lost her job and been evicted from her apartment. While Sarah's investigation led to connecting the woman with emergency assistance rather than jail time, some colleagues complained that her approach was inefficient and inappropriate. We're not social workers, complained Officer Thompson, a 10-year veteran known for his aggressive approach to law enforcement. Our job is to arrest criminals, not to solve everyone's life problems. Martinez needs to understand that being nice doesn't prevent crime or protect the community. His comments reflected a broader philosophical divide within the department about the role of police in society and the most effective methods for maintaining public safety. Despite these criticisms, Sarah continued to refine her approach and build relationships within the community she served. She began to notice patterns in crime and social problems that suggested opportunities for prevention rather than just reaction. Her reports consistently included detailed analysis and recommendations that went beyond simple incident documentation, providing insights that helped supervisors understand underlying issues affecting their patrol areas. Her growing reputation in the community led to requests for her involvement in specific cases where her skills seemed particularly relevant. When a series of vandalism incidents occurred at a local high school, Sarah was asked to investigate not just the crimes but also the underlying social dynamics that might be contributing to the problem. Her investigation revealed tensions between different student groups that were being expressed through destructive behavior, and she worked with school officials to address these issues through mediation and conflict resolution rather than just punishment. This work brought Sarah to the attention of Lieutenant Patricia Hayes, a rising star in the department who had been advocating for community-oriented policing strategies. Hayes recognized that Sarah's natural abilities aligned well with modern policing philosophies that emphasized problem-solving and community partnership rather than purely enforcement-focused approaches. "I've been watching your work, Officer Martinez," Hayes said during a private meeting. "You have instincts and skills that could be valuable for some specialized assignments we're developing. Have you considered detective work or community liaison positions?" The conversation marked the beginning of Sarah's transition from general patrol duties to more specialized police work that better utilized her unique strengths. As Sarah approached the end of her probationary period, she felt more confident about her place in law enforcement than she had since beginning the academy. While she still faced occasional criticism from colleagues who preferred more traditional approaches, she had proven that her methods could be effective and that quiet observation and analytical thinking were valuable tools in police work. Her success had not gone unnoticed by the community she served. Citizens frequently requested Sarah specifically when calling for police assistance, and her name was becoming known among local social service providers as an officer who could be trusted to handle sensitive situations with care and professionalism. These relationships would prove crucial as Sarah faced her next major challenge, one that would test not only her police skills but also her physical capabilities in ways she had never anticipated. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would challenge everything Sarah had learned about herself and force her to draw upon resources she didn't even know she possessed. The call came in on a hot Tuesday evening in August, when the summer heat had left everyone in the city feeling irritable and on edge. Sarah was finishing her shift paperwork when the radio crackled with an urgent request for all available units to respond to a disturbance at Mickey's Bar and Grill, a popular establishment near the military base that served both civilian and military personnel. The initial report was vague but concerning multiple individuals involved in a physical altercation, possible weapons, and the situation was rapidly escalating beyond the control of bar security. Sarah and Rodriguez were among the first units to respond, arriving at the scene within minutes of the initial call. As they pulled into the parking lot, they could see that the situation was indeed serious. A crowd had gathered outside the bar, and, through the large windows, they could see furniture overturned and people moving aggressively throughout the establishment. The bar's security personnel were positioned outside, clearly overwhelmed by whatever was happening inside. The head of security, a former police officer named Jim Walsh, quickly briefed the arriving officers. "It started with an argument between some Marines and a group of local guys," he explained, his voice tense with urgency. "Something about disrespecting military service. It escalated fast, and now we've got 6 Marines who have basically taken over the bar. They've been drinking heavily, they're talking about defending their honor, and they're not responding to any attempts to calm them down." Rodriguez immediately called for additional backup, recognizing that 6 intoxicated and agitated Marines could pose a significant threat to public safety. Military personnel were trained fighters, and alcohol could remove the judgment and restraint that normally kept their skills in check. The situation had all the hallmarks of a confrontation that could result in serious injuries or worse if not handled carefully. As they waited for backup to arrive, Sarah studied the scene through the windows, observing the body language and positioning of the individuals inside. The 6 Marines had positioned themselves defensively in the center of the bar, with tables and chairs arranged to create barriers. Their leader, a large man with sergeant stripes visible on his civilian shirt, was pacing back and forth while the others maintained vigilant positions around the perimeter they had established. "They're not just drunk and disorderly," Sarah observed quietly to Rodriguez. "Look at their positioning and coordination. They're treating this like a tactical situation, not just a bar fight. Someone with military training is organizing their response." Her analysis proved to be accurate as they watched the Marines move with purpose and discipline despite their apparent intoxication. When backup units arrived, the scene commander, Sergeant Peterson, developed a plan for resolving the situation. The standard approach would involve overwhelming force, multiple officers entering simultaneously, issuing loud commands, and using physical restraint to subdue the Marines before they could organize further resistance. It was a textbook response that relied on shock and superior numbers to end the confrontation quickly. However, Sarah had noticed something that others might have missed. While the Marines were clearly agitated and defensive, their behavior suggested they were reacting to perceived threats rather than actively seeking confrontation. Their positioning was defensive rather than offensive, and their leader seemed more concerned with protecting his men than with escalating the violence. She suspected that a different approach might be more effective than the planned tactical response. "Sergeant Peterson," Sarah said quietly, "I think there might be another way to handle this situation." She outlined her observations about the Marines' defensive posture and suggested that a single officer making peaceful contact might be more effective than a show of force that could trigger their combat training and make them view the police as enemy combatants. Peterson's response was skeptical but not entirely dismissive. "Martinez, these are trained fighters who have been drinking and are clearly looking for trouble. This isn't a situation for your usual approach. We need to control the situation before someone gets seriously hurt." His concerns were valid, but Sarah persisted in her analysis. "Respectfully, sir, I don't think they're looking for trouble. I think they're scared and defensive. They're in an unfamiliar environment, they've been drinking, and they feel threatened. Their military training is making them respond tactically, but they're not aggressors. They're protecting themselves because they don't trust the situation." Rodriguez, who had observed Sarah's skills over many months, spoke up in support of her assessment. "She's got good instincts, Sergeant. Her read on situations has been consistently accurate. Maybe it's worth trying a different approach before we go in with force." His endorsement carried weight due to his experience and reputation within the department. After a brief discussion with other senior officers, Peterson made a decision that would prove to be crucial. "All right, Martinez. You get one chance to make peaceful contact. But if this goes sideways, we're coming in hard and fast. And if you get in trouble, we may not be able to help you immediately." The weight of the responsibility was enormous, but Sarah felt confident in her assessment of the situation. As Sarah approached the entrance to the bar, she could feel the tension from her fellow officers behind her. Many of them clearly thought she was making a mistake, walking into a dangerous situation without adequate backup or preparation. The standard police response to this type of confrontation was well established for good reasons, and deviating from proven tactics was always risky. Inside the bar, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The 6 Marines had indeed created a defensive perimeter, and, as Sarah entered alone, their attention immediately focused on her. She could see the calculation in their eyes as they assessed this new threat, determining whether she represented escalation or de-escalation of the confrontation. The leader of the group, Sergeant Michael Torres, was a combat veteran with multiple deployments who carried himself with the confidence and wariness of someone who had faced real danger. His eyes locked onto Sarah as she slowly approached, her hands visible and her posture non-threatening. The other Marines maintained their positions but shifted their attention to their leader, waiting for his assessment of this new development. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you," Torres said, his voice controlled but carrying an undertone of warning. "We're not causing trouble for anyone who doesn't deserve it. We just want to be left alone to finish our business here." His words were respectful but firm, indicating that he was trying to maintain control of a situation that was clearly spiraling beyond his ability to manage. Sarah's response was calm and measured, designed to acknowledge his authority while opening a dialogue. "Sergeant Torres, I can see that you and your men are in a difficult situation. I'm not here to cause problems or to disrespect you or your service. I'm here because people are concerned about everyone's safety, including yours and your Marines." The use of his rank and recognition of his military status had an immediate effect. Torres's posture shifted slightly, becoming less defensive as he recognized that Sarah was treating him with respect rather than simply as a troublemaker to be subdued. The other Marines also responded to this approach, their tension decreasing as they sensed that this police officer might be different from what they had expected. "You don't know what happened here," one of the other Marines, Corporal Jackson, interjected angrily. "These people were disrespecting our brothers who died serving this country. They were saying things about the military that no Marine should have to hear. We weren't going to let that stand." His emotional response revealed the underlying trigger that had started the confrontation. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the validity of his feelings while working to de-escalate the emotional intensity of the situation. "I can understand how hearing disrespectful comments about your service and your fallen brothers would be incredibly painful and angering. You've made sacrifices that most people can't understand, and you deserve respect for that service." This acknowledgement of their feelings and experiences began to change the dynamic in the room. The Marines had expected to be treated as criminals or troublemakers, but Sarah was recognizing their humanity and the legitimate emotions that had led to the current situation. Torres studied her carefully, trying to determine whether her words were genuine or simply a tactical manipulation. "The problem is," Sarah continued, "that this situation has moved beyond just defending your honor. Right now, there are a lot of police officers outside who are concerned that someone is going to get hurt. They don't understand what led to this situation, and they're prepared to use force to protect public safety. I don't want to see any of you get hurt, and I don't want to see any of my fellow officers get hurt either." The reality of their situation began to settle in as the Marines realized that their defensive position, while tactically sound, had created a standoff that could only end badly for everyone involved. They had been focused on the immediate confrontation but hadn't considered the broader implications of their actions or the inevitable police response. Torres looked around at his men, seeing the same realization dawning in their faces. They were all combat veterans who had survived dangerous deployments, but they were now facing a different kind of threat in an environment where their military training might actually work against them. The skills that had kept them alive in combat zones could lead to tragedy in a civilian bar. "What are you suggesting, officer?" Torres asked, his tone indicating that he was willing to listen to alternatives even though he remained wary of police intentions. Sarah could sense that the dynamic was shifting and that an opportunity for peaceful resolution was emerging, but she also knew that one wrong word or gesture could send the situation spiraling back toward violence. The next few minutes would determine whether Sarah's unconventional approach would succeed or whether the situation would escalate into the kind of confrontation that everyone wanted to avoid. The tension in the bar was palpable as Sarah carefully considered her response to Sergeant Torres's question. She could see that the Marines were at a crossroads, torn between their training, their pride, and their growing recognition that their current position was unsustainable. The wrong approach could trigger their combat instincts and turn a difficult situation into a catastrophic one. "Sergeant, what I'm suggesting is that we find a way for you and your Marines to leave this situation with your dignity intact while ensuring that no one gets hurt," Sarah said, her voice steady and respectful. "I think we can work together to de-escalate this situation in a way that honors your service and protects everyone involved." Torres studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. His military experience had taught him to be suspicious of easy solutions and smooth words, but something in Sarah's demeanor suggested genuine concern rather than tactical maneuvering. "And what does that look like, officer? Because from where we're standing, it seems like we're surrounded and being treated like criminals for defending our honor." Before Sarah could respond, the situation took an unexpected turn. Corporal Jackson, who had been drinking more heavily than the others and was clearly struggling with emotional control, suddenly moved toward the bar's entrance where other police officers were visible through the windows. "I'm tired of talking," he declared angrily. "These people disrespected our brothers, and now they want to arrest us for standing up for what's right. I'd rather fight than surrender to this." The other Marines immediately responded to Jackson's movement, their training kicking in as they prepared to support their fellow Marine. Sarah realized that the fragile de-escalation she had been building was about to collapse, and that within seconds, the situation could explode into violence that would likely result in serious injuries or deaths. Without thinking, Sarah stepped between Jackson and the entrance, placing herself directly in his path. It was an instinctive response that violated every principle of officer safety she had been taught, but her analysis of the situation told her that Jackson's emotional state, rather than aggression toward her specifically, was driving his actions. "Corporal Jackson, stop," Sarah said firmly but calmly. "Look at me. You're not fighting for your honor right now, you're about to throw away everything you've served for. Your brothers who died didn't sacrifice their lives so that you could destroy yours in a bar fight." Her words were calculated to refocus Jackson's attention on larger principles rather than immediate emotions. Jackson's forward momentum halted, and, for a moment, the entire room held its breath. Sarah could see the conflict playing out in his face as his military discipline battled with his emotional pain and alcohol-impaired judgment. Behind him, the other Marines were frozen in position, unsure whether to support his actions or follow their sergeant's leadership. "You don't understand," Jackson said, his voice breaking with emotion. "These people were laughing about soldiers dying. They said we were stupid for fighting for this country. They said we deserved whatever happened to us over there. How are we supposed to just walk away from that?" Sarah felt a surge of anger at the callousness of the comments Jackson described, but she channeled that emotion into empathy rather than righteousness. "You're absolutely right that those comments were wrong and hurtful. Anyone who would say such things doesn't understand the sacrifices you've made or the brothers you've lost. But destroying your lives won't honor their memory or change their minds." The room remained frozen as Jackson struggled with conflicting impulses. Sarah could sense that the other Marines were watching carefully, ready to follow either his lead toward confrontation or their sergeant's guidance toward de-escalation. The next few seconds would determine which direction the situation would take. "What would your fallen brothers want you to do right now?" Sarah asked quietly. "Would they want you to throw away your freedom and your future because some ignorant people said ignorant things? Or would they want you to be better than that, to show the strength and discipline that make Marines different from everyone else?" The question hit Jackson like a physical blow, and Sarah could see the fight drain out of him as he considered what his dead friends would actually want for him. His shoulders sagged as the weight of his emotions and the alcohol in his system combined to overwhelm his anger. "They'd want us to be better," he admitted quietly. "They'd want us to take care of each other and not throw our lives away over stupid words." Torres stepped forward and placed a hand on Jackson's shoulder, asserting his leadership over the situation. "The officer is right, Marines. We've let our emotions control us instead of our training and our values. We're better than this, and our brothers deserve better from us." His words carried the authority of rank and experience, helping to solidify the shift toward de-escalation. Sarah felt a moment of relief, but she knew that the situation was still fragile. The Marines had stepped back from immediate confrontation, but they were still surrounded by police officers who were expecting trouble, and any sudden movement or misunderstanding could reignite the crisis. She needed to create a path forward that would allow everyone to save face while ensuring public safety. "Sergeant Torres, here's what I propose," Sarah said. "You and your Marines walk out of here peacefully, with dignity and respect. I'll escort you out personally, and I'll make sure that everyone understands that you're leaving voluntarily because you're choosing to do the right thing, not because you're being forced to surrender." Torres considered the offer carefully. It provided a way for his Marines to leave the situation without appearing to be defeated or humiliated, which was crucial for maintaining morale and discipline. However, he was also concerned about the possibility of arrest or legal consequences for the disturbance they had caused. "What about charges?" asked Private Rodriguez, the youngest of the group and clearly nervous about the potential legal implications of their actions. "Are we going to be arrested for what happened here?" His question reflected the concerns of all the Marines about how their actions would affect their military careers and their futures. Sarah had been considering this issue throughout the confrontation. While the Marines had clearly been disorderly and had created a public safety situation, their actions had been triggered by genuinely offensive comments and had not resulted in serious property damage or injuries. The bar's management had indicated that they were primarily concerned with resolving the situation rather than pursuing charges. That's going to depend on several factors, Sarah explained honestly. The bar management will have to decide whether they want to press charges, and my supervisors will have to evaluate the entire situation. What I can tell you is that leaving peacefully and cooperatively will work in your favor if these decisions are being made. Lieutenant Hayes, who had arrived during the standoff and had been monitoring the situation from outside, made the decision to enter the bar and assess the situation personally. Her presence added another layer of authority to the negotiations, but it also represented a potential complication if she disagreed with Sarah's approach. "Officer Martinez, what's the status here?" Hayes asked as she entered, her tone professional but carrying an undertone that suggested she was prepared to take direct action if necessary. Sarah quickly briefed her on the progress that had been made and the proposed resolution of the situation. Hayes studied the Marines carefully, noting their defensive positioning and emotional state. Her military background, which included service as a military police officer before joining civilian law enforcement, gave her insights into the dynamics at play. She could see that Sarah had successfully de-escalated a potentially explosive situation, but she also recognized the ongoing risks. "Sergeant Torres, I'm Lieutenant Hayes," she said, introducing herself with military formality. "I understand that you and your Marines have been dealing with a difficult situation here. Officer Martinez has done good work in helping everyone step back from a confrontation that nobody wanted. I'm prepared to support her recommendation for a peaceful resolution." The endorsement from a higher-ranking officer carried significant weight with the Marines, who recognized the authority structure and appreciated being treated with military courtesy rather than as common criminals. Torres straightened to attention, responding to Hayes's professional demeanor with military bearing. "Ma'am, we appreciate the respect you're showing us. My Marines made mistakes tonight, but they were defending their honor and the memory of our fallen brothers. We're prepared to accept responsibility for our actions and to leave peacefully." His response indicated that the Marines were ready to conclude the situation in a way that preserved everyone's dignity. However, just as the resolution seemed assured, a new complication arose that would test everyone's commitment to peaceful de-escalation. The crowd outside the bar had grown larger and more vocal, with some individuals expressing anger about the police response and demanding that the Marines be arrested immediately. The external pressure threatened to undermine the careful negotiations that had been taking place inside the bar. The sounds from outside the bar were becoming increasingly hostile as the crowd grew larger and more agitated. Through the windows, Sarah could see angry faces and pointing fingers as people demanded action against the Marines who had disrupted their evening. Some voices were calling for immediate arrests, while others were making inflammatory comments about military personnel that echoed the original triggers for the confrontation. Lieutenant Hayes recognized the deteriorating external situation and the pressure it was placing on everyone involved. "We need to move quickly," she said quietly to Sarah. "The crowd outside is getting worked up, and if we don't resolve this soon, we're going to have a much bigger problem on our hands." The window for peaceful resolution was closing rapidly as external forces threatened to overwhelm the careful progress that had been made. Sergeant Torres and his Marines had also noticed the growing hostility outside, and Sarah could see their defensive instincts beginning to resurface. The progress they had made in de-escalation was being undermined by the crowd's demands for confrontation and punishment. Jackson, who had been calming down, was beginning to show signs of renewed agitation as he heard some of the same types of disrespectful comments that had started the original conflict. "Those people out there are proving our point," Jackson said angrily. They don't respect us, they don't understand what we've sacrificed, and now they want to see us humiliated and arrested. Maybe we should give them what they're asking for." His words reflected the frustration and hurt that had driven the Marine's actions throughout the evening. Sarah realized that the situation was reaching a critical moment where all the progress that had been made could be lost in seconds. The external pressure was threatening to reignite the confrontation just when peaceful resolution seemed within reach. She needed to act quickly to prevent the situation from spiraling back into violence. "Sergeant Torres, Corporal Jackson, all of you," Sarah said, her voice carrying new urgency. "Right now, you have a choice. You can prove those people outside wrong by showing the discipline and honor that make Marines different, or you can prove them right by letting anger control your actions. Which choice honors your fallen brothers?" The question forced the Marines to confront the fundamental issue that had been underlying the entire confrontation. Were they going to be controlled by others' ignorance and disrespect, or were they going to demonstrate the values and character that their military service had taught them? The answer would determine not just the immediate outcome but also how they would view themselves afterward. Torres looked around at his Marines, seeing the internal struggle playing out in each of their faces. As their leader, he had the responsibility to guide them toward the right decision, even when that decision was difficult or seemed to compromise their honor in the short term. His next words would either end the confrontation or escalate it beyond anyone's control. "Marines, we're leaving now," Torres declared firmly. "We're going to walk out of here with our heads held high, we're going to thank Officer Martinez for treating us with respect, and we're going to show everyone what real Marines look like when they choose to do the right thing instead of the easy thing." The authority in his voice and the clear direction he was providing helped his Marines refocus on their military training and values rather than their emotional reactions to the situation. One by one, they began to stand down from their defensive positions and prepare to leave the bar in an orderly fashion. However, as they began to move toward the exit, the situation outside continued to deteriorate. The crowd had grown to include some of the original civilians who had made the disrespectful comments that started the conflict, and they were now emboldened by the police presence to voice their opinions more loudly and aggressively. "Don't let those military thugs get away with destroying the bar," someone shouted from the crowd. "They think they can do whatever they want just because they wore a uniform." The comments were exactly the type of disrespectful language that had triggered the Marines' anger initially, and hearing them again as they were trying to leave peacefully was almost more than they could tolerate. Sarah could see the Marines' resolve wavering as they were confronted with the same disrespect that had caused the original problem. Their faces showed the strain of trying to maintain discipline while being subjected to exactly the type of treatment they had been trying to defend against. The situation was becoming a test of their character and their commitment to taking the high road despite provocation. Lieutenant Hayes made a crucial decision at this moment. Rather than simply escorting the Marines out through the hostile crowd, she chose to position herself between the Marines and the most aggressive members of the crowd, using her authority to create a buffer zone that would protect everyone involved. "Listen up, everyone," Hayes announced loudly enough for the entire crowd to hear. "These Marines are leaving peacefully and voluntarily. They've chosen to de-escalate this situation and to resolve it without anyone getting hurt. Anyone who interferes with that resolution or continues to provoke a confrontation will be arrested for disturbing the peace." Her clear statement of authority and consequences helped to quiet some of the more aggressive members of the crowd, but it also created a new dynamic where the Marines could see that law enforcement was actively protecting them from harassment as they tried to do the right thing. This demonstration of respect and protection had a powerful effect on their willingness to continue with the peaceful resolution. As the Marines began to file out of the bar, Sarah positioned herself alongside Lieutenant Hayes to ensure that the exit proceeded smoothly. However, just as it seemed that the situation would be resolved without further incident, Corporal Jackson suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned to face the crowd. "I want everyone here to know something," Jackson said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "We didn't come here looking for trouble. We came here to relax after serving our country. But, when people started disrespecting our fallen brothers, we couldn't just sit there and take it. We may have handled it wrong, but we weren't wrong to be angry about it. The crowd fell silent as Jackson continued, his words carrying the weight of genuine emotion and hard-earned authority. Those Marines who died overseas were better men than most of you will ever be. They died protecting your right to say stupid, hurtful things. The least you could do is show some respect for their sacrifice instead of celebrating their deaths. His impromptu speech had a profound effect on the crowd, many of whom had not fully considered the implications of their earlier comments or the pain they had caused. Several people looked uncomfortable as they realized that their words had contributed to a situation that could have ended in tragedy for everyone involved. Sergeant Torres stepped forward and placed his hand on Jackson's shoulder, showing support for his words while also gently encouraging him to continue with their departure. Thank you for saying that, Corporal. Now let's show these people what Marines look like when we choose to be the better men our brothers would want us to be. As the Marines continued their exit, several members of the crowd began to disperse, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation and, perhaps reconsidering their earlier attitudes. The combination of Jackson's emotional honesty and the Marines' disciplined departure was having an educational effect that went beyond simply resolving the immediate conflict. Sarah watched the proceedings with a mixture of relief and admiration. The Marines had chosen the difficult path of maintaining their integrity despite provocation, and their example was influencing others to reconsider their own behavior and attitudes. The resolution was becoming a teaching moment for everyone involved rather than simply an exercise in law enforcement. As the last of the Marines reached their vehicles, Sergeant Torres approached Sarah personally. "Officer Martinez, I want to thank you for the way you handled this situation tonight. You could have come in with overwhelming force and treated us like criminals, but instead you treated us like human beings who had made mistakes. That made all the difference in how this turned out." Sarah was moved by his words but also wanted to acknowledge the choice that he and his Marines had made. "Sergeant, the credit belongs to you and your men for choosing to do the right thing even when it was difficult. You had every reason to be angry about what was said, and you showed real strength by walking away from a fight instead of escalating it." Lieutenant Hayes, who had been observing the entire interaction, approached Sarah as the Marines departed. "Officer Martinez, that was exceptional police work. You read the situation correctly, you chose the right approach, and you achieved a resolution that protected everyone involved while addressing the underlying issues. That's exactly the kind of policing our community needs." The compliment from her superior officer was gratifying, but Sarah was more satisfied by the knowledge that a potentially tragic situation had been resolved without anyone being seriously hurt. The Marines would face some consequences for their actions, but they would also retain their dignity and their futures. The civilians who had made disrespectful comments had been forced to confront the impact of their words, and the community had witnessed an example of how conflicts could be resolved through understanding rather than force. As Sarah completed her incident report later that evening, she reflected on how the events had unfolded and what they revealed about effective policing. Her quiet, analytical approach had been criticized throughout her training as being unsuitable for police work, but tonight it had proved to be exactly what the situation required. Instead of escalating conflict through shows of force, she had de-escalated it through empathy and understanding. The incident would become a turning point in Sarah's career, demonstrating that her unique approach to law enforcement was not only viable but valuable. Word of her successful handling of the Marine confrontations spread throughout the department and the community, establishing her reputation as an officer who could resolve complex situations through skill and insight rather than just authority and force. In the months that followed, Sarah would be called upon repeatedly to handle sensitive situations that required her particular combination of analytical thinking, empathy, and quiet strength. Her career would take her in directions she had never anticipated, proving that sometimes the most effective approach to challenging problems is the one that others least expect. The quiet officer who had been told she was too quiet for police work had demonstrated that true strength often speaks in whispers rather than shouts, and that the most powerful weapon in law enforcement is not force but understanding. Her success would inspire others to reconsider their assumptions about effective policing and to recognize that there are many ways to serve and protect communities. The Marines she had helped that night would go on to have successful careers, carrying with them the lesson that true honor lies not in winning every fight but in knowing when not to fight at all. Their encounter with Officer Sarah Martinez had shown them that respect and understanding could come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest victories are achieved through restraint rather than action.